Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Randgold CEO Mark Bristow has declared Africa the next China should investments coupled with aggressive growth be correctly managed. Martin Creamer joins me in studio to tell us more. Hi Martin.
Hi Tracy.
Why does Bristow believe Africa is poised to take over as the global economic point?
Now, there are few people who know Africa more than Dr. Mark Bristow. You know, when I first came across him, and Mining Weekly has been covering him, for more than 2 decades. He was employed by Rand Mines at that stage, and he had already gone into Africa and done a lot of research into exploration possibilities because of his geological background. And I can remember Peter Flack, when I interviewed Peter Flack, who took over the Rand Mines group, which was one of our big mining houses. And his job was really to assess who he should keep in the group, because they were going to list in London, and who, would not make the cut. And I can remember him actually removing a lot of management out of that Rand Mines. And in fact, he got to a point where he was almost in a momentum. He was just about removing everybody. And he said to me, when he got to Mark Bristow, he was astounded, because Mark had such a grasp of Africa, even at that stage, that he said to himself, no, this guy has got to be the CEO, of Randgold Resources. And then they listed that in London. And if you look at, the performance of Randgold Resources, it's arguably, the best discoverer and developer of gold assets in the last 2 decades in Africa. But not only that, Mark takes a keen interest in Africa. He gets on his motorbike and he doesn't just ride around. He collects for charity when he's going around. He collects enormous amounts of money for the good of the people of Africa while he's going around on his motorbike. He meets a lot of people. He sees things that no one else really sees. And it was very interesting when he spoke to journalists this week, and there were a lot of journalists there. I mean, there must have been 20 or 30 journalists. It was really packed. He said he's super excited about Africa. And, from 2025 onwards, he thinks it's definitely sub-Saharan Africa could really be the next China, because China is going off the boil. You do see a lot of activity going towards India and some of the Pacific Rim countries. But coming into the focal point of the next investment cycle is certainly Africa. And he's saying, if you draw a line from Dakar through across to the West Africa, not only are you virtually always close to the sea, which is an advantage, but you've got such a human resource, you've got such metal resources, you've got such forests, you've got such water, and he's done a lot with the water there. His 3rd hydropower station is about to go up in Central Africa, and he's gone into the Democratic Republic of Congo at a key time when he discerns an interesting passage of change where the people are having their say, and it is looking to possibly realizing its full potential. And that's going to be a very important area. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the prettiest girl on the mining block. And if you can get that political, economic activity going correctly, it's going to be very important for all the surrounding countries. And he made the point that the surrounding countries, including Zambia, which he says is into a fix-it mode, after having quite a torrid time, and a lot of the other surrounding countries there, they are not prepared to have a next-door neighbor who's at war. They want, at last, some sort of continuity of peace there, and democratic peace. And he senses some very good outcomes there. Now, I think if anybody can pick up the vibes of Africa, it's him, because he really goes in and he deals at all levels with the poorest of the poor and with governments and everybody in between. So I think Dr. Mark Bristow, he's wonderful to listen to. He's very, very candid and straight. But, he's pointing to Africa, if they can get some investment and aggressive growth, being the next China. He doesn't mean all the pollution and all the other things, but he means that economic activity which can draw, create demand for the world, which is in need of demand at the moment, because the entire globe really is stuttering along in an economic impasse, and we don't know when they're going to come out of it, and hopefully we will come out of it unscathed.
And Bristow has highlighted that investment in infrastructure is needed to stimulate economic growth, but where does he think this investment is going to come from?
He's saying a lot of the countries that are developed, they can no longer achieve the growth rates that they used to be able to achieve by investing in their own country. They've got a lot of their own infrastructure. They can't stimulate too much. He's saying if they take some of that money that they had earmarked for infrastructure in their own country or development in their own country, put some of it in Africa in a collective, structured way, he says it's going to go a long way, because even small amounts in Africa will have exponential benefit. So he's urging these countries to look to putting some money into Africa and to try and nudge it up from an infrastructural point of view. And he knows the infrastructure because, he was talking about like 41 broken bridges that he had to go around on his motorbike, and also that Africa has tended to slip back a bit, and it needs a bit of a stimulus to go forward in the deep-lying country areas. People have sort of been cut off because there's no infrastructure. And another important thing, which is often mentioned as well, is it needs capacity. When we're talking about capacity, it means human capacity. People who know how to run a country. That sort of capacity is needed in Africa at the same time as building its infrastructure. But he feels that 1 + 1 will equal 10 if you start investing in Africa, particularly in the infrastructural side.
And you've mentioned that Bristow knows Africa. What does Randgold's involvement in Africa comprise, and which countries does he find most attractive?
Yeah, at the moment, the Ivory Coast is very much his favoured investment destination. He's already got the Tongon mine there, which is the group's cash cow, but it's really got a 5-year horizon, so he's desperately trying to find more. And he was saying, if you journalists are the fairy godmothers, give me 5 million more ounces in the Ivory Coast, because I just love doing business there. It's so easy to operate in that country. He's saying they've got a long-term planning vision, and they're really making sure that investors can get a good show in, and so he's really talking highly about the Ivory Coast at the moment. But there are other countries which have their problems. Ghana has used to be a favoured destination. That's running into a few problems, heading for an election. He's started off in Mali, did very, very well in Mali. I mean, I went to one of his mines there, the Lula mine, when they were sort of starting to initiate the mining development there, and a lot of the people of the area were ululating. When you go into Africa, the people praise you by ululating. And afterwards I said to them, why are you ululating for Dr. Mark Bristow? And they were saying, before he got here, we were lucky to sort of earn $1,000 a year. Now there's a potential for us to earn $1,000 a month. And what he does is he goes into the host countries, and the majority of his management are people that he's brought up through the ranks, and he employs host management teams to run these mines. So he's doing a lot to uplift the people from a mining point of view. Also, he doesn't leave an area without making sure there's some horizon, like Marilla, which we used to call the gorilla, his first big mine there, which is now virtually depleted. He doesn't want to leave the people without an agricultural future there. So he's been working on the agricultural side to try and give them a new horizon, a new economic horizon. In the Congo, he involves the people, keeps the communities active. He's looked at everything quite carefully in his knowledge of Africa, and most of the places he's coming out of receiving praise from the people and also acknowledgement from government. He had a situation with energy recently in Ivory Coast, and he managed to sort that out. Not that he shies away from telling it as it is, and that candid approach also seems to work. But what was so great is he was saying how super excited he is about this continent, and from my view of his activities there, there are few people who know the place better than he does, and if he's excited, we should be excited, and the world should be excited.
Thanks, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Tracy.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on the mining industry.